Welcome to the Battleground Chronicles World War II channel. Subscribe to our channel because every day we publish stories about the valor of American soldiers based on real events. Support us. Like our videos if you like what we do for you. March 6, 1945, 1830. Remagen, Germany. Captain Willy Bratge stands at the western entrance of the Ludendorff Bridge, watching the endless stream of desperate humanity flowing eastward across the Rhine. Soldiers with hollow eyes trudge alongside civilians clutching meager possessions, farm animals, and the wounded on stretchers. This 398-meter span of steel and stone is one of the last remaining bridges across the Rhine still standing. By tomorrow, Bratge knows, the Americans will arrive. His orders: hold until the last possible moment, then destroy the bridge. What unfolds over the next 11 days will become one of the most horrifying chapters of the war. A nightmare built not on fiction, but on the documented reality of mankind's capacity for destruction. This story is based entirely on witness testimony, military records, and declassified documents from both sides of the conflict. The dawn of March 7th, 1945 breaks cold and gray over the small town of Remagen. A light mist hovers above the Rhine River, partially obscuring the massive stone towers that anchor the Ludendorff Bridge. The structure stands as an ominous sentinel, its steel framework like a massive ribcage stretching across the water. Captain Willy Bratge hasn't slept. Dark circles rim his eyes as he studies a map by the pale glow of a kerosene lamp. The constant flow of retreating German forces has continued through the night. Wounded soldiers, military vehicles, civilian refugees, even livestock, all streaming eastward across the bridge. The war is lost, but his orders remain unchanged. Hold the bridge until the last possible moment, then destroy it. From the window of his makeshift command post in the customs house near the western approach, Bratge can see the massive stone towers that guard the bridge entrances. Built to house an entire battalion of troops, they now hold only a skeleton crew. Approximately 1,000 men in total, many of them Volkssturm militia, old men and boys with inadequate training and equipment. The bridge itself tells a story of German military hubris. Constructed between 1916 and 1919, using Russian prisoners of war's labor, it had been named after General Erich Ludendorff, one of Germany's highest military commanders during the First World War. The irony isn't lost on Bratge. A bridge built by prisoners to fuel one disastrous war would now serve as the death trap for German forces fleeing another. Engineer Captain Karl enters the room, his face tight with worry. "Captain, the demolition charges are in place, but..." Bratge raises a hand to stop him. "But what?" "The explosives, sir. They're not military grade. We've been given commercial Donnerite instead." "Will it do the job?" Bratge demands. Friesenhahn hesitates. "It should, sir, but I would feel more confident with proper charges." "How much were you able to place?" "Approximately 2,800 kilograms, sir, distributed at key structural points." Friesenhahn's voice drops. "But it's the civilian-grade explosive. Its detonation velocity is lower than military charges. I can't guarantee..." "We work with what we have, Captain." Bratge cuts him off sharply. Then, softer, "None of us have what we need anymore." Bratge nods grimly. The shortage of proper military explosives is yet another sign of Germany's collapsing war machine. He moves to the window and looks west, where American forces are advancing. They will be here soon. "Have you tested the electrical detonator?" Bratge asks. "Yes, sir. Everything is connected to the firing point inside the tunnel on the east bank. And the manual backup? In place, sir. A cord that can be lit by hand if the electrical system fails." Bratge turns back to the map. "Very good. Now we wait." As Friesenhahn leaves, a Wehrmacht medical officer approaches Bratge. His uniform is stained with blood, his eyes haunted. "Captain, we have more wounded arriving. The field hospital in Erpel is already overflowing." "How many?" Bratge asks. "At least 60 more, sir. Many with severe injuries, amputations, burn victims from the phosphorus shells." The doctor's voice cracks. "We're out of morphine. We're performing surgeries with only local anesthetic when we have it. Most get nothing at all. Bratge's jaw tightens. Get them across the bridge. Priority for the wounded. The civilians can wait. Sir, some won't survive the crossing. The vibration of the bridge alone could kill those with internal injuries. And what would you have me do, doctor? Leave them for the Americans? Bratge snaps. Then collecting himself, I'm sorry, do what you can. Use the flatbed trucks if any remain. As the doctor leaves, Bratge hears a distant rumble of artillery. The Americans are getting closer. He looks out at the bridge again, at the endless stream of defeated humanity. An old man stumbles and falls on the bridge roadway. Nobody stops to help him up. A woman carrying a child steps around him, her face blank with exhaustion and trauma. Bratge whispers to himself, God help us all. But both men know that waiting is the most terrifying part of war. 1256, March 7, 1945. 8 kilometers west of Remagen. Lieutenant Karl Timmermann, commanding Company A of the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion, Combat Command B, 9th Armored Division, crouches low in his jeep as it climbs a steep hill. Just 22 years old and only promoted to company commander the day before, after his predecessor was wounded, Timmermann feels the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. Born in Frankfurt, Germany, but raised in Nebraska, he now leads American soldiers against his father's homeland. The jeep crests the hill, and Timmermann's breath catches. Through his binoculars, he can clearly see the town of Remagen below. And beyond it, the massive Ludendorff Bridge, still intact and spanning the Rhine. My God, he whispers. The sight is almost impossible to believe. For weeks, the Germans have been systematically destroying every bridge across the Rhine as they retreated. Finding an intact crossing is like stumbling upon a mythical creature. Sergeant Joseph Delizio, crouched beside him, lets out a low whistle. Holy shit, Lieutenant. Is that what I think it is? The bridge is still up, Timmermann confirms, his voice tight. They haven't blown it yet. Maybe it's a trap, Delizio suggests, eyes narrowing. Why would they leave it standing? I don't know. Timmermann raises his binoculars again. There's still traffic moving across it. Vehicles, troops, even civilians. Timmermann's radio man is already contacting Lieutenant Colonel Leonard Engelmann, commander of the task force. Able company to task force commander. The bridge at Remagen is still standing. I repeat, the bridge is intact. Within minutes, Engelmann has arrived to verify the incredible sight himself. The bridge is alive with activity. Vehicles, troops, and civilians still streaming across to the eastern bank. Through his field glasses, Engelmann can make out German soldiers in the stone towers at either end. If we can take that bridge intact, Engelmann begins. That's a big if, sir, Timmermann responds. They've rigged every other bridge for demolition. This one will be no different. Brigadier General William Hoge, commander of Combat Command B, arrives shortly after. The three men stare at the bridge, knowing they're witnessing a pivotal moment in the war. We need to take that bridge, Hoge says simply. There's no time to request permission from higher command. The opportunity could vanish at any moment. Sir, Timmermann begins hesitantly, they'll blow it as soon as we approach. My men will be... I know the risk, Lieutenant, Hoge interrupts, but that bridge is worth a division. Hell, it's worth a corps. If there's even a chance... He doesn't finish the thought. Engelmann turns to Timmermann. Lieutenant, take your company down there and seize that bridge. Timmermann swallows hard but nods. Yes, sir. As he returns to his men, Delizio falls in beside him. So, what's the word, Lieutenant? We're going for the bridge. Delizio whistles low. Crossing the Rhine on foot. That'll be something to tell the grandkids, if we live long enough to have any. Get the men ready, Timmermann orders. Full combat load. We move out in 5 minutes. As Delizio moves away, Timmermann takes a moment alone. He pulls out his wallet and looks at a small photo. His wife and newborn daughter, who he has never seen in person. She was born just a week ago, while he was fighting in Germany. He touches the photo briefly, then tucks it away. At 1350, Timmermann and his company begin their advance down the hill toward Remagen. 30 minutes later, Lieutenant John Grimball's platoon of M26 Pershing tanks follows. As they approach the town, the eerie quiet unnerves them. Where is the German resistance? The narrow, winding streets seem to be holding their breath, waiting. "I don't like this," Sergeant Alexander Drabik mutters as they move cautiously through the deserted streets. "It's too quiet." "Keep your eyes open," Timmerman responds. "Watch the windows, the rooftops." A shot rings out, and Private Henry Collins drops with a cry, blood spurting from his thigh. "Sniper! Take cover!" Timmerman shouts. The men scatter, pressing themselves against walls and diving into doorways. More shots follow, echoing through the narrow streets. "There!" Delizio points to a church steeple. "Second window from the left." One of the Pershing tanks turns its turret and fires a high explosive round into the steeple. The ancient stone erupts in a cloud of dust and debris. "Move forward," Timmerman orders. "Building to building, clear as you go." The company advances through Remagen, encountering sporadic resistance, mostly elderly Volkssturm militia and a few regular Wehrmacht soldiers left behind as a delaying force. The fighting is brief but savage, the desperate defenders knowing they face certain death or capture. In one narrow alley, they find an old man, perhaps 70, dead with an ancient hunting rifle still clutched in his hands. Beside him lies a boy no older than 14, also armed. "Jesus," Drabik whispers, "they're sending children and grandfathers against us now." "They've got nothing left," Timmerman responds grimly, "but that doesn't make them any less dangerous." As they approach the western edge of the town, they get their first clear view of the bridge. It's massive, nearly 400 meters of steel framework spanning the Rhine. German troops can be seen in the stone towers at each end. Timmerman raises his binoculars. "They're preparing to blow it. I can see men moving on the structure." Just then, they capture a German soldier trying to flee eastward. Terrified and young, barely 18, he speaks broken English. "Bridge. Boom. 1600, he stammers. "Orders to destroy at 4 o'clock. Timmerman checks his watch. 1500. 1 hour. He radios the information back to Engemann and Hogue. The response is immediate. "Move now. Take the bridge at all costs." Captain Bratge receives word from his spotters at 1410. American forces are entering Remagen from the west. He must decide when to blow the bridge, but he's caught in an impossible position. Hitler has issued strict orders not to destroy bridges prematurely, following an incident the previous October, when the Mulheim Bridge in Cologne was destroyed too early. Officers responsible had been court-martialed. Blow it too soon, and he faces execution. Too late, and the Americans capture it. Bratge needs written authorization from the newly appointed commander, Major Hans Scheller, who has only held the position since 11:15 that morning. The bureaucratic absurdity of war. "Where is Major Scheller?" Bratge demands of his aide. "Still at the Eastern Command Post, sir. He was inspecting the tunnel defenses." "Get him here now." The Americans are in Remagen. As the aide rushes off, Bratge turns to a young lieutenant, Arno Peters. "How many men do we have in the towers?" "Perhaps 30 in each, sir. Mostly Volkssturm, with a few regular army for leadership." "Machine guns?" "2 MG-42s in each tower, sir, covering the western approach." Bratge nods. "And how many civilians and military are still waiting to cross?" Peters looks grim. "At least 300 civilians, sir, plus about 200 military, mostly stragglers and wounded." "Get them moving. I want that bridge cleared of all but defensive personnel within 30 minutes. "Sir," Peters hesitates, "some of the wounded can barely walk." "Then carry them. I don't care if you have to drag them across. That bridge may need to be blown at any moment." As panic spreads among the defensive forces, many of the Volkssturm militia begin to melt away. Bratge can't blame them. Old men and boys facing battle-hardened American forces. At the same time, German military and civilian stragglers continue to stream across the bridge, creating a chaotic scene. Bratge orders his men to allow all German personnel to cross, but to prepare defensive positions in the stone towers. A harried medical orderly approaches Bratge. "Sir, we still have wounded in the aid station. They can't be moved quickly." "How many?" 15, sir. severely wounded. Moving them could kill them. Bratge's face hardens. If that bridge falls to the Americans, many thousands more will die. Get them across however you can. The orderly blanches. Yes, sir. As he turns to leave, Bratge adds more gently, use the flatbed truck. Make them as comfortable as possible. The sound of American tank fire echoes through Remagen's narrow streets. They're getting closer. Bratge climbs the western tower for a better view of the American approach. Through his binoculars, he can see infantry advancing with tank support. They're maybe 15 minutes away from the bridge approach. Sir, a signalman calls up. Major Scheller is on the line. Bratge climbs down and takes the field telephone. Major, the Americans are inside Remagen. We need authorization to demolish the bridge immediately. Scheller's voice crackles with static. Are you certain they're advancing on the bridge? Could they be bypassing towards Sinzig? Sir, they're heading directly for the bridge. We have perhaps 15 minutes, no more. Are all our forces across? Bratge grits his teeth. Most, sir. We still have wounded crossing. Then hold, Captain. Allow our wounded to escape. Sir, with respect, if we wait much longer. Those are your orders, Captain. Hold until I arrive. I'm leaving Erpel now. The line goes dead. Bratge slams down the receiver, his face pale with rage and fear. Captain? Lieutenant Peters asks. Orders? Prepare for demolition, but wait for Major Scheller's written authorization, Bratge says grimly. And if he doesn't arrive in time, Bratge doesn't answer. Major Scheller finally arrives at 1440, his face ashen. The Americans have broken through faster than we anticipated. Sir, I need written authorization to destroy the bridge, Bratge insists. Scheller hesitates, clearly reluctant to bear the responsibility. Not yet. We must allow our forces time to cross. Sir, with respect, if we wait much longer. A tremendous explosion cuts off Bratge's words. American artillery has begun to fall near the bridge. They're using white phosphorus, an aide reports, creating a smoke screen. Through gaps in the billowing white smoke, Bratge can see American troops advancing directly toward the bridge approach. They are perhaps 5 minutes away. Sir, he turns desperately to Scheller. It must be now. Bratge turns to Scheller. Sir, we must act now. The bridge. Scheller finally nods, scribbling his signature on an order. Do it. Blow the bridge. At 15:20, Bratge gives the order to Captain Friesenhahn to detonate the charges. Friesenhahn rushes into the control room inside the eastern tunnel entrance. With trembling hands, he connects the wires to the electrical trigger. He takes a deep breath, grasps the handle with both hands, and turns it sharply. Nothing happens. He tries again. Still nothing. The electrical detonator has failed, Friesenhahn shouts. The wires must be damaged. We must use the manual backup. As American forces push to the western approach of the bridge, German Corporal Anton Faust volunteers for what seems like a suicide mission. He will run onto the bridge and light the manual fuse while under direct American fire. I need a volunteer, Bratge calls. Someone to light the backup fuse. Corporal Faust steps forward. A quiet, serious man of 24, he has already earned an Iron Cross Second Class on the Eastern Front. I'll do it, sir. You understand what this means, Corporal? Bratge asks quietly. The Americans are at the western end. You'll be exposed the entire way. I understand, sir. Faust's voice is steady, but his eyes betray his fear. What about our men still on the bridge? I've ordered them all back to this side, Bratge says. But you must go now. There's no more time. Faust nods. Für Deutschland, he says simply. Godspeed, Corporal, Bratge responds. Faust checks his pistol, then takes the matches for the fuse. He looks once at the bridge, then back at his comrades, as if memorizing their faces. Tell my mother, he begins, then shakes his head. Never mind, she'll know. With that, he turns and sprints from the cover of the eastern tunnel mouth, zigzagging across the exposed bridge surface. Bullets ping off the steel framework around him as American troops at the western end open fire. Somehow, Faust reaches the manual detonator cord located near the middle of the bridge. With hands shaking from exertion and fear, he drops the first match. The second blows out in the wind. Finally, the third strikes, and he touches it to the fuse. It sputters, then catches. He turns to run back, but a bullet catches him in the leg. He falls, then drags himself forward, leaving a trail of blood on the bridge roadway. The fuse burns behind him, tracking toward the explosives. At 15:38, a tremendous explosion rocks the bridge. The ground shakes, and a section of the bridge near the eastern pier erupts in flame and smoke. But as the dust clears, the impossible becomes apparent. The bridge is still standing. The commercial Donnerite explosives have only damaged the structure, not destroyed it. From his position at the eastern tunnel entrance, Bratge watches in horror as the bridge remains standing. "No," he whispers. "No, no, no." Beside him, Captain Friesenhahn stares in disbelief. "It's not possible. The charges should have been sufficient." The American artillery, Bratge realizes. It must have damaged some of the charges or connecting wires. Friesenhahn shakes his head. "No, sir. It's the Donnerite. Military-grade explosives would have done the job. We were given construction explosives, not demolition charges." Through his binoculars, Bratge can see American troops already moving onto the damaged bridge. It's too late. "God help us," Friesenhahn whispers. "God has abandoned Germany," Bratge responds bitterly. "And now, I fear, so has luck." The inadequate explosives, the cut wires, the hasty preparation. A cascade of failures has left the bridge damaged but intact. And now, American troops are at its western entrance. Lieutenant Timmermann stares at the bridge through the settling dust of the explosion. Against all odds, it's still standing. This is their chance. But first, a problem. The explosion has created a 10-meter crater in the approach ramp, making it impossible for vehicles to cross. "Sergeant Drabik," Timmermann calls to Alexander Drabik, a tall, lanky former butcher from Holland, Ohio. "Take your squad across. Now!" Drabik looks at the bridge. 398 meters of exposed steel framework with German machine guns positioned in the towers at the far end. It looks like a death trap. "You want us to cross that, Lieutenant?" Drabik asks, his voice flat with disbelief. "That's exactly what I want," Timmermann confirms. "We have to secure that bridge before they try to blow it again." Drabik nods slowly, then turns to his squad. "You heard the lieutenant. We're going across." Private Joe Petrensik, barely 19, stares at the bridge with wide eyes. "Sarge, they'll cut us to pieces." "Maybe," Drabik acknowledges, "but somebody's got to be first. Might as well be us." He looks each of his men in the eye. Petrensik, Chinchar, Delizio, Reynolds, Dorland, Semelli. Some he's known since basic training, others joined as replacements after the bulge. All look back at him with a mixture of fear and determination. "Keep moving," Drabik tells them. "No matter what happens, don't stop. They can't hit what keeps moving. Zigzag. Use the girders for cover when you can. We go on my signal." The men check their weapons one last time. Drabik looks at Timmermann, who gives a nod. "Follow me," Drabik shouts to his men. Without hesitation, they charge onto the bridge. The crossing becomes a desperate dash against death. German machine guns open fire from the eastern towers. Bullets ricochet off steel girders with high-pitched whines. The men run in a zigzag pattern, diving from cover to cover. "Keep moving," Drabik yells above the cacophony. "Don't stop!" Private Petrensik stumbles, hit in the shoulder, but Sergeant Reynolds grabs him and drags him along. "On your feet, soldier. Keep moving." 3 combat engineers, Lieutenant Hugh Mott, Staff Sergeant John Reynolds, and Sergeant Eugene Dorland, crawl underneath the bridge's framework, cutting wires to any remaining demolition charges they find, knowing each snip could trigger an explosion. "Blue wire or red wire?" Reynolds jokes grimly as they work. "Doesn't matter," Mott responds tensely. "Cut them all." Each time they sever a wire, they hold their breath, waiting for the explosion that would send them plummeting into the Rhine below. But it never comes. Timmermann follows behind Drabik's squad, his heart pounding. Every step could be his last if the Germans managed to detonate any remaining explosives. The bridge could collapse beneath them at any moment. The structure groans and sways underfoot. The explosion has weakened it. and each footfall sends vibrations through the metal framework. It feels alive, wounded, and dangerous. As they approach the eastern towers, the German machine gun fire intensifies. Bullets snap past their heads and ping off the steel around them. "We need to take out those machine guns," Timmerman shouts. Sergeant Joseph DeLizio breaks away to tackle the southern tower, while Technical Sergeant Mike Chinchar heads for the northern tower. They know the machine guns must be silenced. DeLizio reaches the base of the southern tower and takes a deep breath. Then, with a primal yell, he charges inside and up the circular staircase. At the top, he finds 3 German soldiers attempting to clear a jam in their gun. He fires several shots, then takes the men prisoner. "Hands up! Hände hoch!" he shouts, his voice cracking with adrenaline. The Germans, wide-eyed with fear and surprise, slowly raise their hands. One of them, barely 16, begins to cry. DeLizio throws their weapon out of the window. "We didn't think you'd make it across," one of the Germans says in halting English. "The bridge was supposed to blow up." "Yeah, well, it didn't," DeLizio responds. "Lucky for you. Now move." Chinchar similarly clears the northern tower, capturing more German defenders. The firing from the towers stops, allowing the rest of the American troops to advance more safely. At 1550, Sergeant Drabik becomes the first American soldier to reach the eastern bank of the Rhine, the first invader to cross the river into Germany proper since Napoleon's forces in the early 19th century. Timmerman follows closely behind, becoming the first American officer to set foot on the east bank. "We made it," Drabik says, breathing hard. His uniform is soaked with sweat despite the March chill. "I can't believe we made it." "Don't celebrate yet," Timmerman warns. "We've got to secure that tunnel." The Americans now face another challenge, a 383-meter tunnel bored through the Erpeler Lay, the steep cliff on the eastern side. German forces could be waiting inside to counterattack. The tunnel mouth gapes like the entrance to hell, dark, forbidding, and potentially filled with enemies. The echoing sounds of movement can be heard from within. "We need to clear that tunnel," Timmerman orders. "DeLizio, take your squad. Chinchar, cover the entrance." DeLizio looks into the darkness. "Sir, we don't know how many Krauts are in there." "That's why you're going to find out, Sergeant." DeLizio nods grimly. "Yes, sir." He turns to his men. "Fix bayonets. We go in shooting at anything that moves." The squad advances into the tunnel, weapons at the ready. The darkness swallows them. For a tense minute, there's silence. Then, the sound of a single shot echoes from the tunnel, followed by shouting in German and English. Timmerman and the others wait anxiously. Finally, DeLizio emerges from the darkness, pushing ahead of him a line of German prisoners, approximately 20 soldiers and an officer, their hands raised. "Tunnel's clear, Lieutenant," DeLizio reports. "There are civilians in there too, women, children, old folks, hiding from the shelling." "Keep the civilians in the tunnel for now," Timmerman orders. "It's safer for them, and for us." Timmerman sends Lieutenant Emmett Burrows and his 2nd platoon to secure the top of the cliff, a treacherous climb that results in several men falling and sustaining serious injuries. "That hill is a killer," Burrows reports back, breathing hard from the climb. "Lost 2 men to falls, broken legs, but we've got the high ground secured." By 1600, approximately 75 American soldiers have crossed the bridge and established a small bridgehead on the eastern bank. The impossible has happened. Americans have crossed the Rhine with dry feet. A hand-painted sign is quickly erected on the western tower. "Cross the Rhine with dry feet, courtesy of the 9th Armored Division." As more troops begin crossing to reinforce the bridgehead, Timmerman finally allows himself a moment to process what they've accomplished. "Never thought I'd be back in Germany this way," he tells Drabik quietly. "My father was born here, you know." "Well, you just made history, Lieutenant," Drabik responds. "Not bad for a day's work." Timmerman nods, then looks back at the bridge, their lifeline, and now the most important target for the entire German military. "They'll throw everything they've got at us now. This is just the beginning." "Yeah," Drabik agrees, "but we're across. We're finally across." News of the bridge's capture reaches Adolf Hitler's headquarters at 17:30 on March 7. His reaction is volcanic. The Ludendorff Bridge, in whose demolition charges someone has failed. Find the man responsible, Hitler shouts, his face contorted with rage. I want the incompetent fool who failed to blow up the bridge. I want him shot immediately. General Alfred Jodl, chief of the operations staff of the German Armed Forces High Command, stands rigidly at attention, unwilling to meet Hitler's wild-eyed stare. My Führer, Jodl begins cautiously. Preliminary reports suggest the explosives were insufficient. Lies, Hitler screams, spittle flying from his lips. This is sabotage. This is treason. Find them. Find them all. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, recently appointed commander-in-chief in the West, stands before the Führer, unable to provide satisfactory explanations. This is the worst treason, Hitler continues, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss. Who was responsible for the bridge? I want names. Every officer involved. We are investigating, my Führer, Kesselring responds. Captain Bratge was in command of the western approach. Major Scheller was the sector commander, and Captain Friesenhahn was the engineering officer responsible for the demolition. Arrest them all, Hitler orders. Try them immediately. If found guilty, execute them on the spot. Yes, my Führer. This is treachery, Hitler continues, slamming his fist on the table. This is the work of saboteurs. Within hours, Hitler orders the formation of a special tribunal. Fliegendes Sonderstandgericht West, Flying Special Court-Martial West, under the command of General-Lieutenant Rudolf Hübner to arrest, try, and execute those deemed responsible for the bridge's loss. General Hans Speidel, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Model, describes the scene later in his memoirs. Hitler was beyond reason. The failure at Remagen became an obsession. He saw traitors everywhere, demanding blood for what was in truth a complex failure of men and materials in the chaos of our collapsing fronts. The tribunal moves swiftly. Captain Willy Bratge and 4 other officers are arrested and brought before Hübner's court on March 9th. The proceedings are held in the basement of a schoolhouse in Rimbach, a small village east of the Rhine. The courtroom is bare except for a table where Hübner sits with 2 other officers. The accused stand before them, unshaven and exhausted, their hands bound behind their backs. You are charged with cowardice and dereliction of duty resulting in the loss of the Ludendorff Bridge, Hübner begins without preamble. How do you plead? Not guilty, Bratge responds firmly. We followed protocol. The bridge was to be held until the last possible moment to allow our forces to escape. And yet the Americans captured it intact, Hübner counters. Explain. The demolition charges failed to fully detonate, Captain Friesenhahn interjects. We were issued commercial Donnerite explosives, not military-grade charges. I noted this in my report before the engagement. Silence, Hübner shouts. You will speak when addressed directly. The questioning continues for hours, but the outcome is predetermined. The tribunal is a mockery of justice, a foregone conclusion. All are found guilty of cowardice and negligence. In the name of the Führer and the German people, this court finds you guilty, Hübner announces. The sentence is death by firing squad, to be carried out immediately. Major Scheller, Captain Bratge, Captain Friesenhahn, and Lieutenant Arno Peters stand impassively as the sentence is read. Only Friesenhahn shows emotion, his face paling. I request permission to write to my wife, Major Scheller asks. Denied, Hübner responds coldly. Traitors have no rights. In a twist of fate that saves his life, Captain Friesenhahn's execution is temporarily postponed when documentation is discovered proving that the inadequate explosives were not his responsibility. The other officers are taken outside, where a firing squad awaits. As recorded by an aide to Hübner, Major Scheller's last words are, I die for Germany, not for Hitler. The 3 officers are positioned against the wall of the schoolhouse, none except a blindfold. Ready, aim, fire! The volley of shots echoes through the village. Bratge, Scheller, and Peters fall. For them, the war is over. Friesenhahn, waiting his turn, hears the shots and closes his eyes, preparing for his own execution. But it never comes. American forces advance so rapidly that the tribunal must flee, taking Friesenhahn with them as a prisoner. He will ultimately survive the war, rescued by American troops who overrun the area where he is being held. Meanwhile, Hitler also demands the bridge's immediate destruction, regardless of cost. "I want that bridge obliterated," he orders. "Use everything we have." Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt responds, "My Führer, we will throw everything at it. The Americans will pay a terrible price for their success." From this moment, the battle for the Remagen Bridge takes on a new dimension of horror. The Americans now hold a tenuous position on the eastern bank, but they face the full fury of the Nazi war machine in its death throes. Dawn breaks on March 8th, revealing the Americans' perilous position. The bridgehead on the eastern bank is shallow, barely 300 meters deep, and exposed on three sides. The steep Erpeler lay cliff provides some protection, but German forces are gathering for counterattacks. Lieutenant Timmermann stands at the eastern end of the bridge, surveying their position. The morning mist is beginning to lift, revealing the vulnerability of their situation. "They'll hit us hard today," he tells Sergeant Drabik. "Every hour we hold this bridge means more of our boys getting across." "How long do you think the bridge will hold?" Drabik asks, looking back at the damaged structure. "That explosion did some damage. Engineers say it'll hold for vehicle traffic if we reinforce it. They're working on it now." Timmermann pauses. "But that's not what worries me. The Krauts are going to throw everything they've got at us. That bridge is their worst nightmare." Throughout the day, the 9th, 78th, and 99th Infantry Divisions begin crossing the damaged bridge to reinforce the position. Engineers work frantically to repair the structure, filling the crater on the western approach with rubble to allow vehicles to cross. Private Michael Romano of the 276th Engineer Combat Battalion describes the repair work in his diary. "Working on the bridge is like trying to repair an aircraft while it's in flight. The whole structure shakes and groans. Every time artillery fire gets close, we hit the deck, convinced this is it. The bridge is going down. Then we get up and keep working. Nobody wants to be the one who gives up. The engineers crawl along the underside of the bridge, securing loose plates, reinforcing damaged girders, all while exposed to artillery fire and the frigid water below. At 1400, the first American tanks make it across. Sherman M4A3s from the 14th Tank Battalion. Their arrival is met with cheers from the infantry already across, but the celebration is short-lived. "Incoming!" a soldier shouts as the distinctive shriek of German artillery shells fills the air. The shells impact near the eastern bridgehead, sending shrapnel flying. Men dive for whatever cover they can find. Foxholes hastily dug in the rocky soil, the limited protection of the tunnel entrance, behind the few buildings that remain standing. "Medic!" The cry rises above the explosions. "Medic! Over here!" At 1530, the first German counterattack begins. Approximately 200 German infantry, supported by 3 assault guns, attack from the northeast. The fighting is brutal in close quarters. The Americans, still with limited heavy weapons across the river, are nearly pushed back to the bridge before the attack is finally repulsed. "They came out of nowhere," Private First Class James Miller of the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion later recalls. "One minute we're digging in, the next there's Krauts everywhere. I emptied 3 magazines in as many minutes. They just kept coming. I've never seen men so determined to die." Sergeant William Goodson describes the fighting in a letter home. "The Germans came at us like demons, screaming and firing from the hip. I think they knew what the bridge meant, that it was the end for them if we held it. Some of them had no weapons, just knives or entrenching tools. They were trying to physically push us back into the Rhine. I've never seen such desperation." The American tanks proved decisive, their 75mm guns devastating against the German infantry. By 1615, the attack has been repulsed, but at a cost of 23 American dead and 47 wounded. "We're going to see more of that," Timmermann tells his men as they regroup. "This is just the beginning." Meanwhile, in the skies above, a new horror appears. At 1620, a formation of German aircraft approaches, sleek, twin-engine jets moving at unprecedented speed. These are Arado AR-234B2 turbojet bombers, the world's first operational jet bombers, deployed now in a desperate bid to destroy the bridge. "What the hell are those?" a soldier asks, staring up at the aircraft streaking overhead, much faster than any plane he's ever seen. "Jets," another responds in awe. "The Krauts have got jets." American anti-aircraft gunners have never faced such fast-moving targets before. The jets scream overhead at over 700 kilometers per hour, releasing their bombs before the gunners can effectively track them. Several near misses rock the bridge, sending geysers of water into the air. Staff Sergeant Raymond Tarnow, operating a 90mm anti-aircraft gun on the western bank, describes the experience. "Those jets came in so fast our tracking systems couldn't keep up. We had to lead them by what seemed like half a mile. It was like trying to swat a fly with a sledgehammer. You just couldn't get the timing right." By evening, the Americans have assembled the largest concentration of anti-aircraft weapons of the entire war to protect the bridge, in what will come to be described as the greatest anti-aircraft artillery battle in American history. The sky above Remagen becomes a lethal web of tracer fire. As darkness falls, a new threat emerges. German combat swimmers from the Kriegsmarine, wearing rubber suits and underwater breathing apparatus, attempt to float explosives down the Rhine to destroy the bridge. They navigate the frigid water in the darkness, placing magnetic mines on the bridge piers. American searchlights sweep the water, and guards fire at any suspicious movement, creating a horrific scene as tracers reflect off the black water. Several of the German frogmen are killed, their bodies carried downstream by the swift current. One of the German frogmen, Lieutenant Timmermann Hans Weber, is captured after being wounded in the water. Despite severe hypothermia and a gunshot wound to his shoulder, he is interrogated immediately. "How many others are there?" the American intelligence officer demands. Weber, shivering uncontrollably, remains silent. "Listen," the officer continues, "you're not in the water anymore. The war's over for you. But your buddies are still out there, and my men are shooting at anything that moves in that river. Help me bring them in alive." "We were 12, Weber finally responds, his voice barely audible. "The current, stronger than expected, separated." "What were your orders?" "Place magnetic mines on the eastern pier, timed detonators." The Americans immediately dispatch boats to search for the mines, finding and disarming 3 before they can explode. Through the night, German artillery continues to fire on the bridge, the shells screaming overhead to land with thunderous explosions that shake the entire structure. Sleep becomes impossible for the men defending the crossing. Private First Class Thomas Summers writes in his journal, "Night at Remagen. The sky never goes dark. Constant flares, tracer fire, explosions. The bridge groans like it's in pain. None of us sleep more than minutes at a time. We're all thinking the same thing. How long until the bridge goes? Will we be on it when it happens?" By March 9th, American commanders recognized the precarious nature of their position. The Ludendorff Bridge, already damaged by the failed demolition and now under constant attack, could collapse at any moment. General Courtney Hodges, commander of the U.S. First Army, issues urgent orders. "Establish alternate crossing points immediately. The Ludendorff Bridge cannot be relied upon indefinitely." Engineers from the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion begin constructing a floating tactical bridge approximately 400 meters downstream from the Ludendorff Bridge. They work in full view of German artillery spotters on the eastern heights, and shells rain down continuously on their position. A particularly vulnerable point in the construction is dubbed Suicide Point, the forward end where floating sections are attached. At 1300, a direct hit from a German shell kills 1 engineer and wounds 5 others. "They've got us zeroed," Lieutenant James Morris shouts to his men. "Keep moving. Standing still makes you a target." Despite the danger, the engineers continue their work. The bridge must be completed before the Ludendorff fails. It's a race against time with lives hanging in the balance. Corporal Frank Hostetter describes the tension. "Every minute we expected the Ludendorff to go. We could hear it creaking and groaning even over the sound of artillery. We knew if it went before we finished our bridge, the whole bridgehead could be cut off. So we worked like men possessed, around the clock, under constant fire. Meanwhile, on the Ludendorff Bridge itself, engineers from the 9th Armored Engineer Battalion work frantically to strengthen the damaged structure. They crawl along steel girders high above the rushing Rhine, welding and bolting, always aware that a direct hit from artillery or an aerial bomb could send them plummeting to their deaths. Captain Hogan of the 276th Engineer Combat Battalion supervises the desperate repair efforts. The entire structure vibrates when heavy vehicles cross, he reports. We're reinforcing it as best we can, but it wasn't designed for tanks. How long will it hold? General Hoge asks. Impossible to say, sir, Hogan responds. The failed demolition damaged key stress points. The continual shelling isn't helping. I'd say days, not weeks. Do what you can, Hoge orders. Every hour that bridge stays up is critical. The vibration he refers to is noticeable to everyone who crosses. Each footstep seems to send tremors through the metal framework. When vehicles cross, the entire bridge sways slightly, creaking like a living thing in pain. Private Henry Ross of the 78th Infantry Division describes crossing the bridge. It felt alive, like some wounded beast that might collapse at any moment. You could feel every step through the whole structure. The metal made these awful groaning sounds. Guys were running across, nobody wanting to spend an extra second on it. I've never been so scared in my life, and that includes being under direct fire. By nightfall on March 9th, the bridgehead has expanded to approximately 1.5 kilometers deep and 3 kilometers wide. More American troops continue to pour across, but the Germans are bringing up reinforcements of their own. The night sky is lit by the constant flash of artillery and the streams of tracer fire from anti-aircraft guns. The noise is unending, a hellish symphony of explosions, gunfire, and the groans of the bridge's stressed metal. Sergeant Alex Drabik, still defending the eastern approach, writes to his brother, "This place is hell on earth. The noise never stops. The Krauts are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at us, but we're holding. They're desperate to knock out the bridge, but so far, it's standing. How long? Nobody knows. We just take it minute by minute." March 10th brings new horrors to Remagen. Hitler, increasingly unhinged, orders the deployment of Germany's most secret and terrifying weapons against the bridge. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, receives the Führer's orders with growing concern. In a secure telephone conversation with General Gustav Adolf von Zangen of the 15th Army, he outlines Hitler's demands. The Führer has ordered the bridge destroyed at any cost, Model explains. He is deploying weapons from the special arsenal. What weapons? Zangen asks. Everything, Model responds grimly. The railway gun, the V2s, even the Karl Gerät. Nothing is being held back. My God, Zangen whispers. In a populated area? The Führer's orders are clear. The bridge must be destroyed regardless of collateral damage. At 09:15, lookouts spot the approach of a massive railway gun, an enormous 270mm K5E cannon mounted on a reinforced railway car. The Germans have positioned it approximately 12 kilometers away, hidden in a railway tunnel when not firing to protect it from Allied aircraft. When the massive gun fires, the sound is unlike anything the American troops have ever heard. A deafening crack, followed by an ominous whooshing, as the projectile, weighing over 200 kilograms, arcs toward the bridge. The first shell misses by nearly 100 meters, sending a column of water skyward. But the German gunners adjust their aim. Incoming! The warning shout goes up as soldiers dive for cover. The third shell strikes terrifyingly close to the eastern pier, showering engineers working on the bridge with debris and river water. Throughout the day, the railway gun fires at irregular intervals, each massive shell bringing the possibility of catastrophic destruction. It sounds like a freight train passing overhead, Private James Moorhead describes in a letter home. You hear the shot, then this ungodly shriek as the shell comes in. Then the explosion. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. The ground jumps under your feet. These aren't ordinary shells, they're monsters. At 1730, an even more ominous threat appears. German V-2 rockets, the world's first long-range ballistic missiles, are launched from positions in the Netherlands, specifically targeting the bridge. This marks the first use of the V-2 against a tactical target rather than as a terror weapon against cities. The V-2s give no warning. They travel faster than the speed of sound, so the explosion is the first indication of their arrival. The ground shakes as one lands approximately 270 meters from the bridge, creating a massive crater and destroying several buildings in Remagen. 3 soldiers are killed and 30 wounded. 1 second, everything was normal, recalls Sergeant William Tate of the 78th Infantry Division. The next, there was just this enormous explosion. No warning, no sound of approach. The ground jumped like an earthquake. I was knocked flat. When I got up, where there had been 3 houses, there was just a smoking hole. Over the next several days, a total of 11 V-2 rockets will be fired at the bridge, though none will score a direct hit due to the missile's inherent inaccuracy. The psychological impact of these weapons cannot be overstated. Lieutenant Colonel Clayton Rust writes in his report, "The effect on morale was significant. Conventional artillery, even aircraft, provided some warning. Men could take cover. The V-2s struck without any indication they were coming. There was nothing to do but hope you weren't in the impact zone. The random, unpredictable nature of the threat created a pervasive anxiety among the troops." Underground, another German weapon makes its appearance. Combat engineers from the Brandenburg Commando Unit infiltrate through old mine shafts and tunnels, attempting to reach positions where they can attack the bridge with explosives. American counterintelligence, warned of the threat, conducts house-to-house searches in Remagen, capturing several of the German commandos. One of the captured commandos, Oberfeldwebel Kurt Schmidt, is interrogated by American intelligence officers. "What was your mission?" the American interrogator demands. Schmidt, a veteran of the Eastern Front with a missing left ear and burn scars on his face, stares back defiantly. "To destroy the bridge, of course." "How are you planning to do that?" "We have access points, tunnels under the river from the old mining operations. We were to place charges on the eastern pier, below the waterline." The psychological toll on the soldiers at Remagen intensifies. They face weapons of unprecedented power and sophistication, rockets falling silently from the sky, massive artillery shells that can destroy the bridge in a single hit, jet aircraft that strike before they can be seen, and underwater saboteurs planting explosives under cover of darkness. Death could come at any moment from any direction. Private First Class Michael Donovan writes in his journal, "You can't prepare for this. We trained for combat, but not this science fiction horror show. Rockets from space, jet planes, frogmen underwater. The bridge itself feels like it's dying, shaking and groaning. Everyone's on edge. You see guys jumping at shadows, twitching at every sound. Nobody sleeps. We're all just waiting for the end to come, one way or another." By March 12th, the floating tactical bridge downstream is complete, offering an alternative crossing point. But the Ludendorff Bridge remains crucial, and American forces continue to use and defend it despite the escalating German attacks. The bridge itself seems to be deteriorating. Engineers report increasingly large vibrations when vehicles cross. Strange metallic groans emanate from the structure at night, audible even over the sound of artillery. Captain Milton Haygood of the 276th Engineer Combat Battalion notes in his log, "Metal fatigue evident in multiple stress points, bridge flexing beyond design parameters when under load." He reports his findings to Colonel David Pergrin, commander of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion, who has overall responsibility for the bridges at Remagen. "What's your assessment, Captain?" Pergrin asks, his face grave. "Sir, the bridge is living on borrowed time," Haygood responds frankly. "The failed demolition damaged key structural members. Add to that the constant artillery impacts, the vibration from heavy vehicles, and the ongoing stress. It's a miracle it's lasted this long. Can we strengthen it further? We're doing everything possible, sir, but there's only so much we can do under combat conditions. The core structure is compromised. Pergrin nods. Keep your men working on it, but safety first. No unnecessary risks. We have the pontoon bridge operational now. Yes, sir, but sir, the men on the bridge. I know, Captain, I know. At night, in the beam of searchlights, engineers can see fine metal shavings drifting down from friction points in the bridge's structure, like blood seeping from wounds in a dying beast. On March 14, the German High Command deploys its most massive artillery piece, the Karl 600mm siege mortar. This monstrous weapon fires shells weighing 2,170 kilograms, larger than some small cars. The first round lands nearly a kilometer from the bridge, the massive explosion sending a shock wave that can be felt even at that distance. What the hell was that? Sergeant Drabik asks as the ground shakes beneath their feet. That, Lieutenant Timmermann responds grimly, is something I hoped I'd never see. The Germans call it Karl. It's a 600mm mortar. Jesus Christ, Drabik whispers. 600 millimeters? The shell weighs as much as a car, Timmermann confirms. If that thing scores a direct hit on the bridge, he doesn't need to finish the thought. They both know what it means. While the Karl proves too inaccurate to target the bridge effectively, its psychological impact is enormous. The sound of its firing, a deep, resonant boom, causes men to instinctively duck for cover, and the ground shakes when its shells impact. Corporal Henry Jackson describes the effect in a letter home. We've got a new visitor, some kind of super cannon the Krauts are using. When it fires, you feel it in your bones. The explosion is like the end of the world. Leaves a crater you could put a house in. Thank God their aim is lousy. If they ever hit the bridge square with that monster, there won't be enough left to build a footbridge. Underwater, German frogmen make another attempt to destroy the bridge on the night of March 15th, 16th. 7 specially trained SS combat swimmers from SS Kampfschwimmergruppe enter the near-freezing Rhine, carrying magnetic mines. The current proves stronger than anticipated, and the men struggle in the frigid water. American searchlights spot movement in the river, and machine guns open fire, churning the water with bullets. Several of the German swimmers are hit and disappear beneath the surface. The survivors, exhausted and suffering from hypothermia, are captured when they reach the shore. One of the captured frogmen, SS Unterscharführer Werner Müller, is treated for hypothermia and minor wounds before being interrogated. How many more missions are planned? The intelligence officer asks. Müller, still shivering despite the blankets wrapped around him, stares straight ahead. I don't know. Were you volunteers or ordered to the mission? A flicker of emotion crosses Müller's face. Volunteers. We all volunteered. Why? It was practically suicide. Müller looks up, his eyes hollow. Because everything is lost if that bridge stands. Everything. Above, the air battle continues unabated. German Luftwaffe attacks intensify, with Arado jets making multiple bombing runs each day. American anti-aircraft gunners become increasingly proficient at leading the fast-moving targets, creating a wall of flak that the jets must fly through. In one particularly fierce air battle on March 16, German pilots show suicidal determination, flying directly into concentrated anti-aircraft fire to reach bombing position. 6 German aircraft are shot down in a single hour, their wreckage crashing into the Rhine or the surrounding countryside in balls of flame. Lieutenant John Crawford of the 482nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion recalls, they were coming in almost vertically, diving through our flak curtain like it wasn't there. I've never seen such determination. One pilot, his aircraft already burning, stayed on course to release his bombs before crashing. These weren't the same Luftwaffe we'd been fighting. These were men on a suicide mission. The desperation of the German attacks reflects Hitler's obsession with destroying the bridge. Field Marshal Kesselring later wrote in his memoirs, "The Führer's preoccupation with the Remagen bridge bordered on mania. Every conversation, every briefing returned to the same question: is the bridge destroyed yet? When the answer was negative, his rage would erupt anew." March 17, 1945, 1500 hours. Engineers working on the Ludendorff Bridge report an ominous change in the structure's behavior. The vibrations have intensified. When vehicles cross, the entire bridge visibly sways. Sharp cracking sounds, like gunshots, occasionally ring out as rivets snap under stress. Lieutenant Richard Fairbrother of the 276th Engineer Combat Battalion is walking the length of the bridge, inspecting recent repair work, when he notices something alarming. The southeast truss is showing signs of buckling, he reports via radio. We need to halt traffic immediately. Orders are given to clear the bridge. Military police at both ends begin turning back vehicles and troops. Engineers already on the structure are ordered to evacuate. Sergeant Thomas Ryan is working on reinforcing a damaged section near the middle of the bridge when the evacuation order comes. Everyone off the bridge, now, move it! Ryan and his squad begin making their way toward the eastern bank, the closest exit. But the bridge feels different beneath their feet. The vibrations more pronounced, the swaying more noticeable. It doesn't feel right, Private First Class David Miller tells Ryan as they walk quickly toward the shore. Something's wrong. Just keep moving, Ryan responds, trying to keep his voice calm. Don't run. Steady pace. But it's too late. At precisely 15:01, a sound like thunder rolls across the Rhine Valley as the first major structural member fails. Lieutenant Fairbrother and the engineers with him feel the bridge lurch beneath their feet. Run! Fairbrother shouts. It's going! The men sprint toward the eastern bank, the nearest shore for most of them. The bridge begins to twist, the roadbed tilting at an impossible angle. Oh God, Miller chants as he runs, his feet slipping on the tilting surface. Ryan grabs his arm to steady him. Keep moving, we're almost there. At 15:02, with a scream of tearing metal, the main span collapses. Soldiers and engineers on the bridge are thrown into the air as the structure falls away beneath them. Some manage to grab onto railings or girders. Others plummet 30 meters into the icy Rhine below. Private Henry Wilson is working on the underside of the bridge when it gives way. He finds himself suddenly suspended in space, hanging from a girder as the bridge collapses around him. The whole world seemed to drop away, he later recalls. There was this ungodly noise, metal tearing, men screaming. I was hanging there watching people fall past me into the river. I thought, this is it. This is how I die. Somehow, Wilson manages to climb up to a more stable section and eventually reaches shore. Others are not so fortunate. Sergeant Ryan and Private Miller, still running for the eastern bank, are thrown into the air when the section beneath them gives way. Ryan manages to grab a dangling cable, but Miller plunges into the Rhine, disappearing beneath the churning surface. The collapse sends a massive wave surging outward from the impact point. The floating tactical bridge downstream is damaged as the wave hits it, though it remains operational. Rescue boats immediately launch from both shores, racing to save those thrown into the river. The swift current carries struggling men downstream, their cries for help barely audible over the continuous artillery fire that doesn't cease even during the rescue operations. Private Frank Martinez is in one of the rescue boats. We could see men in the water, trying to swim in that frigid current. Some had injuries from the fall. We pulled out as many as we could reach, but the current was so strong, carrying them downstream faster than we could row. And the Germans kept shelling us the whole time. No mercy, not even for a rescue operation. The human toll is devastating. 28 American engineers are killed in the collapse. Of these, 18 are missing and presumed drowned, their bodies carried away by the Rhine's powerful current. An additional 93 are injured, some critically. 3 of these will later die from their wounds. Captain Haygood, who had warned about the bridge's deteriorating condition, is among the missing. Last seen trying to help a wounded man off the collapsing structure. From his command post on the Eastern Heights, Brigadier General William Hoge watches through binoculars as the bridge, which his men had so daringly captured just 10 days earlier, disappears into the Rhine. But the strategic victory remains. The Americans have established a solid bridgehead east of the Rhine, with over 125,000 troops already across. We knew it couldn't last forever, he tells his staff quietly. But it served its purpose. We're across. That's what matters. By the time the bridge collapses, American engineers have completed not only the tactical floating bridge, but also a heavy pontoon bridge and a Bailey bridge across the Rhine. The flow of men and materials continues uninterrupted. Field Marshal Model, commanding German forces in the area, recognizes the strategic disaster. With American forces firmly established east of the Rhine, the industrial Ruhr region, Germany's last significant resource base, is threatened with encirclement. In his headquarters, Model receives the news of the bridge's collapse with a bitter laugh. "Too late," he tells his staff. 10 days too late. As night falls on March 17th, the twisted remnants of the Ludendorff Bridge lie half-submerged in the Rhine. Searchlights from both banks illuminate the grotesque, skeletal remains of the structure, now resembling the rib cage of some massive prehistoric beast. On the eastern bank, soldiers gather silently, staring at the wreckage. Many had crossed that bridge days earlier, never imagining it would become a tomb for so many of their comrades. "I was on it just 3 hours ago," Private James Harlow whispers to no one in particular. "Just 3 hours ago. Divers will continue to search for missing engineers for days, but most bodies will never be recovered, claimed by the Rhine like sacrifices to an ancient river god." Lieutenant Colonel Clayton Rust conducts a somber roll call of the 276th Engineer Combat Battalion, the unit that suffered the heaviest losses. Name after name receives no answer, the silence more eloquent than words. Captain Milton Haygood, silence. Lieutenant Richard Fairbrother, silence. Sergeant Thomas Ryan. The list continues, 28 names in all. Men who had worked desperately to maintain the bridge, only to die when it finally surrendered to the laws of physics and the battering it had received. For the men who fought at Remagen, the horror of those 11 days, from the bridge's capture on March 7 to its collapse on March 17, will never fully fade. They faced weapons of unprecedented destructive power, V-2 rockets falling silently from the stratosphere, 600mm mortar shells that could obliterate entire buildings with a single hit, jet aircraft that struck before they could be seen, frogmen placing explosives in the dark waters below, and the bridge itself, a massive structure under such stress that it seemed alive in its death throes. Sergeant Alexander Drabik, the first American to cross the Rhine since Napoleon's forces, sits alone on the eastern bank, staring at the collapsed bridge. Lieutenant Timmermann finds him there. "Thinking about that first crossing?" Timmermann asks. Drabik nods. "Seems like a lifetime ago. 10 days. Just 10 days. You made history, Sergeant. First American across the Rhine." "Yeah," Drabik responds. "But at what cost? Look at it now." They sit in silence for a long moment, watching as searchlights play over the twisted wreckage. "What happens now, Lieutenant?" "We go on," Timmermann responds simply. "We've got a bridgehead. 5 divisions across already. The Rhine was Hitler's last natural defensive line. Now we're past it. How much longer, do you think? Until it's over?" Timmermann shrugs. "Weeks, maybe. Not months. They threw everything they had at us here, and it wasn't enough." On March 25th, the Americans break out of the Remagen bridgehead, beginning an advance that will help encircle the Ruhr and trap 430,000 German troops, the largest surrender of enemy forces on the Western Front during the war. The capture of the bridge advanced Allied operations by weeks, possibly saving thousands of lives that would have been lost in a contested river crossing. Dwight D. Eisenhower would later call it worth its weight in gold, and one of those bright opportunities of war which, when quickly and firmly grasped, produce incalculable effects on future operations. The official U.S. Army history of the operation concludes, "Remagen proved that a single tactical event, properly exploited, can have strategic consequences far beyond its immediate battlefield impact." The 4 original stone towers that anchored the bridge survive to this day. Since 1980, the Western Towers have housed the Peace Museum Bridge at Remagen, documenting the bridge's history and serving as a memorial to the men who died there. For the families of the 28 American engineers who perished in the collapse, and for the unknown number of German soldiers and civilians who died during the battle, The bridge represents something else, a monument to war's capricious cruelty, where survival often depended not on skill or courage, but on the random chance of being in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The Rhine continues to flow beneath where the bridge once stood, carrying its secrets, and perhaps some of its victims, ever onward toward the North Sea. The story of the Remagen bridge crossing has been told many times, in military histories, memoirs, and even a Hollywood film. But these accounts often sanitize the reality of what happened there in those 11 days in March 1945. The true horror of Remagen wasn't in fictional monsters or supernatural elements. It was in the very real nightmare of modern warfare at its most desperate and technologically advanced stage, where human beings faced weapons of unprecedented destructive power, where split-second decisions meant life or death for thousands, and where the boundary between heroism and annihilation was as thin as a metal bridge girder over the cold waters of the Rhine. For Lieutenant Karl Timmermann, the first American officer to cross the Rhine, the capture of the bridge brought fame, but not happiness. He died of cancer in 1951, just 6 years after his historic crossing, having never fully adjusted to civilian life. In his final days, Timmermann spoke often of Remagen. "I still hear it at night," he told his wife. "The sound of the bridge groaning, the shells exploding. I see the men who didn't make it back. I wonder why I survived when so many didn't." Sergeant Alexander Drabik, the first American enlisted man across the Rhine, survived the war only to die in an automobile accident in 1993, while en route to a reunion of his old unit. In a letter to Timmermann's widow years after the war, Drabik wrote, "Not a day goes by that I don't think about that bridge and what we did there. It changed me forever. Some nights I still wake up thinking I'm running across it, with bullets flying around me. I can still feel the vibration of it under my feet." Captain Willy Bratge, the German officer who faced the impossible decision of when to blow the bridge, survived his death sentence when American forces captured the area where he was being held before his execution could be carried out. After the war, Bratge met with both Timmermann and Drabik at a ceremony marking the 10th anniversary of the bridge's capture. The three men, once mortal enemies, embraced, united by their shared experience of the horror at Remagen. "We were all just soldiers," Bratge said at the time, "following orders, doing our duty as we understood it. The bridge was our fate." Captain Karl Friesenhahn, the German engineer responsible for the bridge's demolition charges, also survived the war. In an interview decades later, he reflected, "Not a day passes that I don't think about Remagen. I knew the charges were inadequate. I reported it. But in those final days of the Reich, no one was listening anymore. Everything was chaos." When asked if he felt responsible for the bridge's capture, Friesenhahn responded, "Of course I felt responsible. It was my duty to destroy that bridge. But I also know that even if it had been properly demolished, the Americans would have crossed the Rhine somewhere else, perhaps days or weeks later. The war was lost long before Remagen. The bridge itself was never rebuilt. Its dramatic capture and subsequent destruction marked both the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany and the dawn of a new age of warfare, where rockets, jets, and weapons of mass destruction would come to dominate military thinking. Today, visitors to Remagen can still see the stone towers that once anchored the bridge, standing like ancient monoliths on both banks of the Rhine. They serve as silent witnesses to those terrifying days in March 1945, when for 11 days, a damaged railway bridge became the focal point of humanity's most destructive war and the site of one of its most horrifying battles. In the Peace Museum housed in the Western Towers, a simple plaque bears the names of the 28 American engineers who died when the bridge collapsed. Nearby, another memorial remembers the German soldiers who died defending it, and the civilians of Remagen killed in the fighting. The final exhibit in the museum is perhaps the most powerful. A twisted piece of the bridge's original steel framework, recovered from the Rhine decades after the collapse. The metal is corroded and bent, bearing silent witness to the forces that destroyed it. Beside it, a simple inscription reads, "This bridge was built by prisoners of one war and destroyed in the chaos of another. May the waters that flow beneath it carry away our hatred, leaving only our common humanity. Thank you for listening. If you are also proud of the bravery of our soldiers, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical stories.